All right, everyone, welcome to our Fall-oween Forensics Showcase. Thanks a lot for being here. Really excited y'all are here. Our fall showcase is designed to be a little bit more intimate. In the spring, our showcase is normally in Newman Auditorium, and so we really publicize for that one. But right now, we're super excited that y'all are here to get to experience some of the events we've been running this semester, as well as some really brand new things as well, too. I'll give you a little bit of a rundown as far as what we do to give folks last couple of minutes to kind of trickle in, and then show you kind of the rundown of what the events will be like. You'll notice today will be very kind of Halloween themed. A lot of the speeches and performances you'll see are a little spookier in regards to the characters, the topic, and the subject matter. And so it should be kind of fun and also a little bit of, give you some Halloween vibes. Some specifics about me and the team, and then also the showcase itself. And so I'm Dr. Josh Hamzahi. I'm the director of the Forensic Speech Debate and Performance team right here. I'm done. And so with that, I'm the main coach as far as the events you'll see here. What we do is work with students on their speech ideas or performance ideas to get them into like a really interesting product. And in addition to putting up the speeches and performances, if folks are interested, they end up traveling all around the country and presenting them at different schools. And so for example, this semester we've already been to San Francisco State. We were at University of Nevada, Reno last week. We'll be heading to Southern California at the end of this semester. We go to Chicago in January, all the way up until Nationals in Reno again in April. And so some of the events you'll be seeing now have been up either for a month or so, folks have been working on it, or they just got them up this week, and so you'll be seeing some brand new stuff as well too. Some basics about what we do. If you're interested in the squad, feel free to chat with any of us afterwards or sign your name in the sheet with providing your email. We can send you an email about our team right afterwards. There's a couple of different ways that you can be part of this, but we'll chat about all of that towards the end today. A couple things, thanks to the department for allowing us to basically be a team again. The second thing, thanks for, is our custodial staff who ends up cleaning up after us a lot of times, and we really appreciate that as well. You might see some of them trickling in towards the end of this. As far as events we've done so far this semester, most of our events are 10 minutes or under, and we've been working on about 50 different events. And so if you think of that in hours terms, what is that? My math people. 50 events, 10 minutes each. 7 hours or so of events. That's like 4 full productions of a play. And so if you think about what we're kind of doing, if you put all the events back to back. And so a lot of really cool work done by the team. Last couple of things, as far as phones, make sure that if you can, they're on silent or on airplane mode. Put your babies on vibrate, please. And then last basic thing before we talk about the showcase itself, a couple content warnings. Some of the topics have some serious subject matter to them. So for example, conspiracy theories and fear gets a lot into the news. When we get into true crime and missing people, a lot of that deals with folks that have been murdered and how do we get their voices out, and who declares how worthy they are of getting press. When we get into bodily autonomy and tracking, a lot of that deals with a little bit of a dystopia, but some very real moments as far as who controls whose bodies. And then lastly, we'll get into maybe sometimes the scariest issue of all, what happens to our Earth as it starts being destroyed, not only by us, but also by non-man-made objects as well. So last couple of things just for you to notice. We'll have, just make sure we get you out of here in about 75 minutes or less. We'll have 4 full performances. So the ones that are in red, they'll be 10-minute performances. The ones that are in yellow, you're going to see 2 to 3-minute performances. And so if you're really interested in seeing more of them, come to our intramural tournament on December 1st, or join the team and you'll get a chance to maybe work with them as well too. One other note, you'll be seeing a mix between performances and speeches, and before each of them go up, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown so you know kind of what you're looking at. You'll see a book like this for a lot of the performances. This just goes back to the homage of this kind of activity for the last like 150 years, where you're performing out of a text, and so you're doing a justice to the author's words. This ends up being used as a prop, or sometimes it's just kind of there as something to hang out with. It's your pet for the day. And so that's what you'll be seeing with this. Last thing is, if something is funny, what do? So good, right? Hey, Susan, come on in. Yeah, and if something is sad, what do? Yeah, see your tears. And so this should be an interactive experience, even though these feel like monologues sometimes. They're really just a dialogue. They're a conversation with the audience. And so the whole goal of whether you're talking about speeches or performances is how well you can communicate your message. And that is the ultimate goal, no matter if you're doing a traditional speech or something more creative like a monologue or a piece of poetry. So are you all ready to get started? Yeah. So I'll give you a little rundown of our first performance. And again, these are all 10 minutes or less, so you get a little bit of a chance to kind of dive into their characters. The first performance will be done by our a new team member who joined us this year, Casey Thornton. We'll be doing a poetry interpretation for you. A poetry interpretation, they use a text of poetry, so something with rhythm, something sometimes with rhymes, sometimes not, and they bring that out to you in 10 minutes. The only difference you'll see, think of the 10 minutes, the first minute and a half is basically like a movie trailer. They're giving you all the exposition, all the things you need to know. Then they'll close their book and give you their academic argument. Basically, this is why this piece matters, or here is some of the context behind the text they used. Then they'll open it back up, and they have the next 6 minutes to finish off their performance. Make sense? All right, so this should be pretty fun. So our first performance, Casey Thornton and poetry.
I was in Germany around the time of the terrorist attack in Munich, a mass shooting in which 9 people were killed. July 2016, 2 days before there had been an axe attack in Wewelsburg. No casualties. 2 days after there would be a machete attack in Reutlingen. 2 casualties. These events made headline news across the world. They came at a time when tensions surrounding the refugee crisis were, and still are, hitting a boiling point. Not just in Germany. France had suffered a brutal terrorist attack less than 2 weeks earlier in Nice, 86 casualties. And in Paris the previous November. And in Belgium, where an attack on Brussels airport left 30 dead. And in Greece, on whose shores thousands of refugees were now landing every day, where extremist anti-Western sentiment had been coalescing under the flag of the so-called Islamic State, a group had explicitly stated they were going to be sending sleeper agents into Europe along with the refugees. It was a fucking mess. Nobody had any real information. And everybody was watching Germany. There will be blood, said the continent's right wing. And when the Munich attack happened, we on the left, privately, began to wonder if they were right after all. In our current political climate, it's more important than ever to be informed. Unfortunately, fear-mongering and disinformation can come from even reputable news sources. We as an audience are then put in the position of deciding what is fact and what is propaganda. This poem is from the perspective of a man slowly losing his sense of reality to the news. Presenting David by the Narcissist Poet. Back home we hadn't had an attack since the London bombings in 2005, mind you, 52 casualties. But the news had been waterboarding us daily with footage of the makeshift camp in Calais containing just under 7,500 refugees. Compare that to the number Germany had taken. By some estimates, over 1.1 million. And we, like most Oilanders I guess, start to look a little hysterical in the face of change and overly concerned with maintaining the sanctity of our personal space. Our country and the rest of the continent was divided between those that felt there were lessons we had to learn from the fallout of the Holocaust in the Second World War. We had nothing short of a moral duty and obligation to take in as many refugees as we can, and those who felt a large group of people entering the country would be a strain on our resources and a threat to our culture, with the added twist. These people were coming from a region we had been for over half a decade bombing the fuck out of. On my way home from Germany, I stayed overnight in a hotel in Paris, and I woke in the middle of the night to the sound of screaming, gunshots, commotion. And next to my bed, standing over me, it's 2 Middle Eastern men with nobody had any real information. So the tabloids and blogs did what tabloids and blogs do best. Syrian asylum seeker, refugee crisis, Muslim terror attack. The human brain isn't designed to be a truth detector. It's designed to respond to stories. The more evocative, the better. There is a gap that was left empty when we outsourced our folk storytelling to Hollywood. And the tabloid press has stepped in to fill its space. They take the ordinary, day-to-day pieces of our lives. The airports, the shopping centres, the immigrants, the weird, unfamiliar religions, and they rearrange these pieces in front of our eyes into terrifying constellations. Until one of those constellations snags against something dark and amorphous in our subconscious, triggering the release of a potent natural speedball, dopamine, endorphins, adrenaline, keeping us coming back to the same papers and the same blogs for more of that feeling because we enjoy being afraid. We enjoy being afraid because that payload of dopamine, endorphins, adrenaline is the same bunch of chemicals we feel when we are happy. That's why most of us feel amazing after watching a horror movie. And it's why the Daily Mail Online is the English language's most visited news provider. You don't just enjoy hearing stories about monsters. You go looking for them. And I was aware of all this. I knew the games the right wing played. I thought being onto their games meant I was safe from them. I could dip in and out of the swamp at will without fear of being infected by it. And I was dipping in and out of it regularly. Because I was following one of the most interesting US election cycles in modern fucking history. Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. The great unpopularity contest, a nationwide poll to see who is the most unlikable. Every morning I'd wake up and it'd be the first thing I'd Google. And Donald Trump had made xenophobia the keystone of his campaign. Listen to him speak meant throwing your gates wide open and inviting his bit-emitted Trojan horse inside your brain. I did this every day. I did this every day. This is how people go insane. This is how you forget what is real and what is a smear of bird shit on your window pane. Screaming, gunshots, commotion. And next to my bed, standing over me, two Middle Eastern men with assault rifles speaking in a language I didn't understand. And I knew instantly that a group of terrorists had taken the hotel and were going room to room executing the Western infidels. I knew. And then I woke up. I opened my eyes. My bedroom was empty. This is the moment I realised the monster stories I've been laughing at had burrowed through my eyes and ears and had hatched while I was sleeping. They weren't just in the news and in the papers anymore, they were in my fucking head. Syrian asylum seeker, refugee crisis, Muslim terror attack. Replicating the conditions, emulating the lesson. This is how I learned I'm not too smart to fall for all the rhetoric and bile. I am not immune to the disease the right wing is deliberately trying to spread. You know the killer behind the Munich terror attack? 18-year-old David Somboli, a secular German citizen who was targeting Turks and Arabs. He idolised a Norwegian terrorist who killed, among 55 children who he believed are part of some global left-wing conspiracy. David Somboli supported Germany's far-right political party, and he considered himself a proud member of the Aryan race. I try to remember this when I have the narcissism to assume my fear of something is evidence that that something is worth being afraid of.
Awesome, thanks a lot, Casey. If you don't know, Casey got 4th place in that event last week, taking it out for the first time. And so, good job. All right, next up, we're going to give you a little bit of a shorter performance. Again, we'd love to show you every single event, the whole 10 minutes of it, but you all only have so much time, and we only have so much time as well. And so we have one of our things we're going to show you is the next up, our event is going to be a duo interpretation. This event is with 2 people doing some of the similar things that Casey's doing, except you have 2 people doing it. The text can be from dramatic text, so like monologues, plays, movies, documentaries. It can be poetry. It can be from short stories. Everything is fair game. You're only going to be seeing one of our duos. Someone had a little bit of an issue getting here today, and so you won't be able to see the Carne y Arena one. If you're interested in that, come check it out at the intramural tournament. It's a really cool duo about border culture and virtual reality and what that means by actually experiencing something. But instead, you're going to see a shorter duo. Instead of seeing the entire program, you're going to see basically the movie trailer part of it, as well as the introduction. So pretty much like the first 3 minutes that Casey did. Without further ado, I guess we'll get started with Angela Mariani and Sofia Obaj.
Hi, I'm Special Agent Christian White with the Public Relations Subdivision of the FBI. I want to give a shout out to my assistant here.
Special Agent just in case. New here, just watching, learning.
A huge thank you to the SRJC for giving us a time slot to recruit.
Go Bear Cubs!
To hear so many talented people talking about issues, it's vital your voices are heard.
Now vital and recorded. I've gotten to know many of you through your emails.
Which brings us to today's subject.
Co-Intel Pro!
Our counterintelligence program. The Bureau's efforts to
Expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and neutralize political parties. It was a secret U.S. organization that targeted U.S. citizens for political oppression, and it's time to come clean.
Now, I hear you all thinking.
Not literally, but we are working on it.
I imagine you're all thinking, Christian White, COINTELPRO is history.
Much like many we targeted, Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, the Nation of Islam, United Left Feminists, United Farm Workers, Communists and Socialists, but we outed the gay people to the media.
That's why the Freedom of Information Act was passed. We at the Bureau were told we have to declassify several thousand documents about how we dealt with those groups. So,
To take accountability,
we will show you a declassified document.
in the name of the legislative, the judicial, and the executive. Ta-da! That's redacted.
Anybody know that word? Redaction? The FBI's counterintelligence program started in 1956, and it originally began to disrupt the activities of the Communist Party in the United States, according to FBI records.
However, it quickly grew to target many well-known activist groups at the time.
Brian Glick's War at Home lays out the 5 tactics that were developed against these groups, which include infiltration,
Psychological warfare,
legal harassment,
illegal force.
and undermine public opinion.
Officially, this program ended in 1976, but we can still see these tactics used today.
For example, a People's Watch article from August 4th, 2022 states that last year, the FBI carried out several violent raids against multiple locations associated with the African People's Socialist Party.
So today, we pose this question. Who Watches the Watchmen? Co-Intel Show, a Patriot Act.
By L.M. Bogad.
Thanks a lot for that. And again, a super brand new event, so excited to see what happens with that over the year. And if you want to see more of that, check it out at the intramural tournament. Next up, we are changing gears a little bit by going more towards a traditional speech. And so if you've been in a Com 1 class, you've probably experienced an informative speech before, or if you've seen a TED Talk, very similar to that. And so you're going to see Sophia Omage one more time coming up and giving up her informative speech. And then just this weekend, ended up getting first place at the tournament with one in every single round. And so without further ado, let's see Sophia.
In August of 2021, the internet exploded after a young white woman went missing in Grand Teton Park. Her name was Gabby Petito. True crime fanatics and self-proclaimed sleuths immediately began investigating from their homes. Because of the unprecedented amount of media coverage the case received, Gabby's body was quickly found and her family has since been able to lay her to rest. However, that same month, 150 non-white people went missing, according to the National Missing Persons Database. Most of these cases didn't receive coverage, and for those that did, it was limited. This phenomenon is called missing white woman syndrome. You might be like me and millions of other Americans who consume true crime because the stories are fascinating. Maybe you've noticed this underrepresentation of minorities in such media. Maybe you've questioned the effects on real-life cases, or the ethics behind what Pew Research June 2023 calls the most common interest America can't get enough of. And so without further ado, today I want to welcome you to my podcast, Sophia's Serial Secrets. In 3 exclusive episodes, we will first unpack what missing white woman syndrome is, second, investigate its application to true crime and the media, before finally discussing 2 key implications. Right after this message from today's sponsor, Mansion Murder Mystery. Can you solve whodunit? Welcome to episode 1. So to start, what is missing white woman syndrome and why is it so problematic for true crime? Missing white woman syndrome is a fairly recent development, and to better understand it, we need to look back at the roots it stems from. True crime scholar Professor Jean Murley tells The New Yorker that America's continued fascination with the ideal white victim stems from historical frontier captivity narratives and racist films such as Birth of a Nation. The white damsel in distress portrayed in such narratives has long been an icon Americans cling to for entertainment. The term missing white woman syndrome was officially coined in 2004 by journalist Gwen Ifill. She said it as sort of an offhand comment, a joke, that rang so true it stuck. A real-world example. In 1999, Asian American FBI intern Joyce Chong was murdered, but it was fellow white FBI intern Chandra Levy who got the headlines. And we see the same problem today in true crime. According to a 2021 Sacramento State study by student Daniel Slackoff, among the top 4 true crime podcasts of 2021, there were 39 episodes that would discuss an individual missing or murdered female victim. 71.9% of these episodes were about an individual white female victim. 4 were about Latina women, 3 were about black women, 2 were about Asian American women, and there were no individual episodes on missing or murdered Indigenous women. Now, this is despite the fact that a 2022 National Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Task Force report shows that 710 Indigenous people have gone missing in the last decade from the same Wyoming area Petito was found in. The Sacramento State study also shows that these podcasts use sensationalistic language bordering on flippant, trivializing the very real violence that these victims faced. Additionally, and unsurprisingly, the creators are profiting off of this content with Patreon subscriptions and merchandise such as mugs, sweatshirts, stickers with catchy phrases, and even misplaced ad promotions, not unlike the one in my introduction. Again, unsurprisingly, most of this money is going directly into their own pockets, and most of the time this content is produced without consent from friends or families of the victims. Maybe we should start looking a little more closely at these true crime podcasts we love so much. Which brings us to episode 2, the application of missing white woman syndrome. But first, it's time for me, the host, to talk about myself. Here is 60 Seconds with Sophia. Yeah, I'm not actually going to do that. But this is based on, almost verbatim off of a real podcast called Murder with My Husband, where after they introduced the title of the episode, they jumped straight into 10 Seconds with the Husband, talking about mundane things going on in his life. Now, this was a little unnerving to me as a listener and seemed misplaced considering the content that was about to follow. In 2006, after missing white woman syndrome was coined, comedian Jon Stewart satirically coined this algorithm dictating media coverage of missing people. It reads, family income times abductee cuteness plus skin color squared minus length of abduction times media savvy of grieving parents cubed. Now obviously this was satire as well, but in 2022 the Columbia Journal Review made this a harsh reality when they published a program that calculates if you were to go missing, how much you would be worth. It pulls from empirical data all over the internet, and its factors include age, race, gender identity, and the area you live in. Right now I'm going to share some real results, starting with my own. I am a 20-year-old white woman from California, and according to this calculator, I am worth 82 news stories. But to really understand this research, we must compare my data to others. Sharice Walker Bingham was a 51-year-old black woman from Indianapolis, Indiana, and she was one of the 9 women of color reported on in the top 4 true crime podcasts of 2021. According to this calculator, Sharice is worth 7 stories. Another example, a 30-year-old Latino man from New York is worth 5. Now, how a story is told and how much media coverage it gets can dictate how a case unfolds. In 2004, a black woman named Tamika Houston was murdered, but was pushed out of the headlines by 3 white women who went missing around the same time. I'm not saying these women didn't deserve media coverage, but why was it Tamika's case that was dismissed? Though her perpetrator was caught in 2006, would he have been caught sooner had her case not been pushed aside? These results force us to ask, if you were to go missing, how much would you be worth? And how would your story be told? Our final episode today involves 2 key implications of true crime's use of missing white woman syndrome. First, on the victims and families, and second, on the creators and consumers of the content. But first, the victims and families. True crime podcasts have the power to affect real change on cases that have gone cold. In 2019, a mini-series on the abduction and murder of college student Kristen Smart was published called In Your Own Backyard. It was because of this podcast that police were able to make an arrest in 2021, finally bringing Kristen and her family justice they only hoped for 23 years. But what about the stories that never get told? The ones we will never hear about? Tamika Houston's aunt, Rebecca Howard, who continues to passionately advocate for coverage of Tamika's case, was quoted in an interview saying, "If we don't see these women, what does it really mean? What are we really saying about ourselves in America?" 4-time Emmy Award-winning journalist Naresh Javacampo notes in a CNN interview that the underrepresentation of minorities in such media actually puts them more at risk to be victims. If perpetrators realize that certain victims statistically get less media coverage, they will target them more. Second, the creators and the consumers. We must remember that the victims and violence in these podcasts are very real, and so are the consequences of how we consume their stories. For example, let's quickly chat about content creator Bailey Sarian, who you may know better for her series on YouTube called Murder, Mystery, and Makeup. While Bailey casually applies foundation, she may be recounting how a woman was brutally stabbed multiple times. Is it time for mascara? Perfect. Let Bailey tell you about the sexual assault of a murder victim. Is this content educational, or is it exploitative? Another example, that of American Vandal. If you recall, this was a mockumentary produced by Netflix that follows a U.S. high school trying to catch a student who was drawing penises on school property. This satire only worked because it critiqued real podcasts like Serial and Making a Murderer, highlighting the sensationalism so often associated with true crime. So again, is this demonstrating that we view this content as education or purely as monetizable entertainment? Rebecca Howard stopped advocating passionately for coverage of her niece's case in the early 2000s, saying it felt exploitative. Tamika's own aunt felt that this was so self-serving. What does this say about creators who so flippantly turn victims' trauma into content for money? And what does this say about us as the consumers? Today, we have learned what missing white woman syndrome is, looked at its application to true crime in the media, and finally discussed 2 key implications that show us how we can be more ethical true crime creators and consumers. Now, I'm not telling you to stop listening to true crime or never to follow the stories of victims who happen to be white. Every case deserves equal media coverage. But maybe we can be a little more mindful and aware of how we do it. With that, thank you for listening to Sophia's Serial Secrets. Leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.
Perfect. All right, thanks a lot, Sophia. Next up, we're going to get a little bit of a speech medley. And so similar to the duo where you only saw the first 3 minutes, you're going to see the same thing with 2 brand new speeches that we're just getting up. The first one will be by Yana Ross talking about land acknowledgements, and it's an informative speech. And the second one will be by Kevin Swastiki, putting up an after-dinner speech, which is a humorous speech about a persuasive issue about gaslighting. So really exciting. First up, we'll have Yana Ross.
This land acknowledgement calls us to commit to continuing how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We affirm Indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold Santa Rosa Junior College more accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous peoples. Discuss. Just kidding. But have you ever had to give a land acknowledgement? I have. And I wasn't interested in providing a perfunctory performative preamble, so I wrote my own. And I presented it recently at Sonoma State University before the honored guest speaker, our local hero, NASA astronaut Colonel Nicole Mann, the first Indigenous person in space. I am an enrolled citizen of the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria, who is comprised of 2 local tribes, the Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo, whose ancestral territory spans Sonoma County and all of Marin County. And I bring that up because land acknowledgements are about more than land. They're about people, inextricably connected to the land. The Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian current website informs us that, quote, land acknowledgement is a traditional custom. It dates back centuries in many Native nations and communities, and today it's being used by Native peoples and non-Native peoples alike, end quote. And they're being used increasingly in schools, various organizations, and some businesses to remind us that the area upon which we gather was originally and still is inhabited by Indigenous people, in case you are completely bereft of any basic understanding of American history. And although it is an act of exhibiting diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, we must more closely examine the complexities of how land acknowledgements are being used and why that matters.
Thanks a lot, Yana. Next up is Kevin Swastiki.
My bad. Hello, impoverished students. Welcome to Gaslighting 101. My name is Professor Kevin Swastiki. Actually, scratch that, not Professor. Instructor Kevin Swastiki. The board did not see me deemed worthy of the professor title because they told me gaslighting isn't real. Even though I've studied, been gaslight, and have perfected the fine art of gaslighting. But sure, whatever. Calm's real. That's just English out loud. All right. I've lost my projector privileges due to budget cuts, and this class will be cut short due to budget cuts. But I did bring our syllabus that I did not steal from Professor Josh Hamzy. I'll pass it out, and please take care of it. I have expended all of my paper allowance for this semester. This will be an introductory course into gaslighting, how to prepare gaslights, and how to analyze gaslights. I did not steal this course description from the comm department. Don't go at me. Over what would have been a 0.0009 week-long course, or for the mathematically challenged, a 9-minute long course has been cut to 2 minutes. Thank you. Over what would have been this 0.0009 week course, we would have covered 3 units. The first unit is how to implement gaslighting at home through lying to your partner, lying to your friends. And units 2 and 3 would be about my personal heroes, my pro-gaslighters, doctors and politicians. I went to the doctor, but he told me it was nothing. I just kept on complaining, and I started coughing up blood, but he told me I'll be fine. All right, thank you.
Oh yeah, you need a syllabus back, of course. We got one of those. So you just saw a little bit of a speech kind of sampler platter. If you're interested in more of those, or see the rest of them, come to the intramural tournament on 12/1. Next up, we have another 10-minute performance for you. This is a new team member of ours from this fall semester. They took this prose out to the first tournament and ended up getting first place right away. It's prose interpretation, so similar to Casey's poetry interpretation, they use a text, but it's meant to be written for the page as opposed to for rhythm or for the stage. And so prose interpretation, same rules, 10 minutes or less. The first minute and a half is like a movie trailer. Second minute's an abstract or a summary of the piece. And then they finish it up with the last 6 minutes of the text. Without further ado, we have Soren Siobhan with Racket Test.
The Romans had silphium. The Chinese had acaranthus fruit. The Shoshone had stone seed. The Lakota had sagewort. Millennials had mifepristone and misoprostol. It is 2091. Grace is looking at the corner for visual overlay. There's a rabbit. It's an Angora rabbit, fluffy and white, and when Grace first picked it out, she didn't realize what it would come to mean. A reminder? A threat? In 1931, Friedman published a simple, rapid procedure for the early diagnosis of pregnancies, involving 1 urine sample and 1 unlucky rabbit. Step 1, inject the urine into the veins of a live juvenile female. Step 2, dissect the body. If its ovaries are enlarged and yellow, then congratulations or condolences. It's not the death that indicates the pregnancy. The rabbit always dies. There are 3 other authorized users to Grace's rabbit test. Her mother, father, and the family doctor who installed it shortly after her first menses. In 2 months, Grace will be 18 and she can disable the tracker. But she doesn't have 2 months. Her period is 6 days late. Tomorrow, her tracker will automatically administer a pregnancy test. According to the Center for Reproductive Rights, 1 out of 4 people with uteruses will need to terminate a pregnancy in their lifetime. And yet today, abortion is banned in 13 states. We are under more surveillance than ever before. Information culture and surveillance culture are increasingly enmeshed. The more our daily lives are dependent on the exchange of information, the more we risk having that information exposed, including personal information about our bodies and our choices. The struggle for reproductive rights is not just the right to an abortion. It is the right to maintain, choose, and know privacy. This is Rabbit Test by Samantha Mills. It's 1821 and she's fleeing town in disgrace. It is 2091 and Grace has no idea how a womb works, but somebody does. She had watched her cycle tracker like a surveillance drone over a labor march. Even though her parents had disabled the setting that showed her most fertile days, she'd done the math. She's failed her parents and her God and her teachers and her boyfriend. She is going to hell. But not today. Everything leaves a trail, so she takes her little brother's scooter from the garage. She doesn't make it 5 miles before there's a horn blaring and her father shouting and her mother sobbing. The scooter had a geolocator tag she'd forgotten about. It's 1839 and she can't manage a 5th child on seamstress work. It is 2092 and Grace is a disappointment to her mother. Breathe. Grace is breathing. She's also crying. She had read everything that she could about pregnancy and childbirth, but nothing had prepared her for this. Breathe. Her mother is next to her, but they are hardly speaking. There are drugs, but she is in terrible pain. As the anesthesiologist ups the dose and half her body immobilizes, she starts to have a panic attack. More drugs trickle and Grace doesn't remember what happens next. A nurse holds up an infant. It's a girl. It is 1878, and she is bleeding to death in her bathtub. It is 2107. Grace's daughter is 15 years old. They've been on their own for 5 years, finally outside of her mother's house. It's such a relief to not be ducking her head in shame. It isn't Olivia that Grace is ashamed of. She loves her daughter. Rather, it's what it took for her to get out of that house. A decade of minimum wage shift work and her mother's remonstrations about her character. But it's over. Her own life is under her own control. And then May comes. It is 1965, and she has to convince a hospital review board she's suicidal. It's 2107, and Olivia comes home from a party. She's tired. She's sick. She doesn't remember anything. They run a blood workup, but whatever was in her system is already gone. minutes later, she falls on Grace's shoulder. Grace already knows. It's her rabbit test. It wasn't installed at Grace's request. Med chips are mandatory at age 6. The rabbit test at age 10. It's been a statewide law since 2102, and Grace can't afford to leave the state. Olivia is a minor. In the eyes of the law, her body belongs to Grace, and therefore Grace is responsible for what happens next. I can fix this if that's what you want. She talks Olivia through the risks of childbirth and pregnancy versus the risks of taking a miscarriage. She tries to give her the information that she wishes she'd had, building a conversation without a blueprint. She does everything she can to cover her tracks. An anonymous device from a throwaway account, an exchange location in a terrifying part of town where the network is always down. A night spent coaching her through the breathing, the cramps, measuring the size of the blood clots, rehearsing what they're going to say to the doctor the next morning. It isn't enough. It's 2023 and she's crying. Our grandmothers fought so hard. One suspicious nurse flags Olivia's behavior. Grace's background is scrutinized. Her location data is inspected. And then evidence where she didn't even know how to destroy it, a drug test performed on their household wastewater line. Grace is arrested for murder. She doesn't want to be cast as a mad woman who shoved pills down her daughter's throat in a fit of old-fashioned hysteria. But it takes the sentence down from 20 to 12. And all Grace can think about as she's led out of that courtroom is, I had 5 years of my own. I had 5 years.
Thanks so much, Soren. Next up, we'll have our last performance medley, where we'll see 3 3-minute performances. Again, if you're interested in seeing the whole thing, come to the intramural or check out one of our practices. We'll be seeing a poetry program by Alyssa Provost, using much of her self-published poetry. Second, you'll be seeing a dramatic interpretation, where we take something meant for the stage, so a movie, a documentary, a film, that's a movie, a play, anything, a podcast possibly, and he turned that into a 9-minute monologue. And then third, you'll be seeing another dramatic interpretation pulled from Hannah Gadsby's stand-up show, Nanette. And so first up, we'll have Alyssa Provost with poetry.
I write poetry about motherhood and family life, and I actually published this book, and I want to share with you a poem. I remember sitting in my living room, pregnant with my first child, watching reruns of Oprah, 9 p.m. because, you know, my husband worked this swing shift, and she had these ladies on who had researched successful women and looked for commonalities about all of these successful women. Of course, a lot of the things were things we don't have any control over. But one thing really jumped out at me, and it was that all of these successful women who had mothers who had pursued their own dreams. They pursued their own achievements. So I felt an obligation to my daughters to publish, to set an example of pursuing my dreams. I also encountered a lot of people in the process of sharing my poetry who told me about their mother's poetry. Poetry that was rotting in attics. And I felt an obligation to publish to those women who would have loved to have the opportunities that I have as a 21st century mom. So this is my book diary. It has a light side and it has a dark side. Because like all your mothers, I have a light side and a dark side. And because this is the Halloween event, I'm going to share from the dark side. I can't feel your pain. I won't feel your pain. I have felt the unending anguish of a million deaths paraded in garish light before rapt eyes until my soul bled a river of all the fucks I ever had to give. And I'm empty now. A porcelain shell with glass eyes that don't flinch and don't cry, and pretty lips that don't sigh and breathe platitudes to comfort those who haven't learned that life is not what you gather, but a long, hard race to lose it all. My pain is enough. To think of 8 billion others suffering in solidarity is enough. I cannot feel it all and survive.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. Next up is Daniel Farrell.
You're all here. All right. Hey, I am an intelligent worm. I crawl a mile inside the earth. I eat rock until my lungs are black. The ultimate graveyard shift. My name's Floyd. Yeah, well, I'm an alcoholic. Every morning I hop in a wire cage that drops me 1,400 feet straight down. And if that cable don't hold, I expect them to stop that cage before it hits the bottom at 200 miles an hour, driving my heels through my eye sockets. Whew. Well, all right then. So I'm about a mile underground just doing my job. My failed hockey player son, Johnny, close by. Then the world blows apart. Oh. I don't remember what happened. A flash, an explosion. No time to shout a warning to Johnny. I don't remember waking up. Oh, no. I remember the pain. The waiting. The Roaring 20s, a decade known for marathon dancers, flagpole sitters, flag flappers, and, you guessed it, bootleggers. Could very well have been known for a different reason altogether. In 1923, the United States was home to 860,000 coal mine workers who bore witness to an era of United States history filled with more coal mine catastrophes than any other. Today, around 38,400 coal miners remain where they are still vulnerable to collapse and black lung.